Okay, we should be live now. Sorry about that. I'm running a little bit late this evening compared to the previous live streams, which you typically start on time. This week is going to be pretty light in terms of topics. There's not a whole lot that's been happening in the tech world outside of Intel. There's some interesting stuff from Intel that we can talk about. Just to kind of start things off here, the Intel Core i9 14900KS has been rumored, I guess, or special edition CPU pictured ahead of launch, priced around $750. I don't know how interesting this is. Hey EGM, hey RK. Oh, that's RK. This is RK's new CPU. He just doesn't know it yet. The Intel George Foreman Grill Special Edition. Yeah, so I don't really know. There's not a whole lot to get excited about with this. Anything that has the 14th gen label is really not. It's not really that different from the 13th generation. Like as far as I know, there's like nothing new about it. So, Vietnamese retailer leaks Intel's i9 14900KS CPU 6.2 gigahertz chip priced at around $750. I don't know. There isn't much information about it. I mean, according to this, 6.2 gigahertz. What does the 14900K run at? Like, isn't that one already like 6 gigahertz? So that is pretty impressive though. 6.2 gigahertz. Yeah, that is going to be a George Foreman grill. If it really is, I mean, they're okay. Look at that though. Look at that, guys. 150 watt. 150 watts. We all know that if Intel says 125 watts, it's actually more like 300 watts when it runs on unlimited power on your typical Z790 motherboard. So if 125 watts is actually more like up to 300 watts, then what's 150 watts? 150 watts is what, like 350 watts? So a 350 watt CPU. You know what? This CPU might use more power than an RTX 4080 Super. Like full load, if you fully load a 14900KS, it probably pulls more power than your graphics card. There's a good chance. Unless you're on like a really, really high-end graphics card. Can't the 14900K pull 400 watts? Yeah, but not stock. It doesn't do it stock. It can. It can. Now I'm talking about stock. So if this thing could pull like 350 watts, unlimited power mode stock, the 14900KS can easily pull over 400 watts. I mean, this is all they're doing here is they're blasting power. They're taking golden samples and they're blasting power, the power limit to get kind of where they need to be, I guess, to sell this thing in enough numbers. But I mean, if you look at the price of the regular i9, it's like $589. That's the box price or something. Like this is significantly more than that for not a whole lot, to be honest. So I don't know, like I don't know. I don't think it's going to have anything I don't think it's going to have anything significant in terms of like memory overclocking capability compared to the regular one. Hey, Royal with cheese. KS is the Antarctica edition. Yeah, you would need a chiller. So RK saying he runs the 1300KS at 6.3. That's how you got to 45K. Yeah, with the chiller, right? That's why they're saying the Antarctica edition. Yeah. They're using the best Tatooine sand. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is something. I feel like this is even less exciting than the RTX 40 Super series were. Yeah, with a chiller, you can get yours to run at 6.3. So 6.2, now, when they say 6.2, keep in mind, this is like this is like a lightly threaded, very lightly threaded, like no more than two cores, or two threads, I should say. So that could literally only be one core. It's one core, but remember, Intel has hyperthreading on those P cores, and these are the P core speeds, not the E core speeds. So a single core processing two threads could periodically hit 6.2 gigahertz on one of these under the best conditions. So by best conditions, the best cooler you could possibly throw on there, and unlimited power on the motherboard, and all that kind of stuff. And it has to be very, very lightly threaded. I'm meaning, you're not gonna be able to run Cinebench and clock these up to 6.2 gigahertz stock. That's not what this is. Like, people who think that's what this is, they're gonna be in for disappointment if they buy one of these and expect that to be a thing. That less than 5% performance difference. Yeah, well, with the actual overclock that Arcade's been able to do, that is a pretty significant score. 45,000. I mean, that's nothing compared to Threadripper, but that's still significantly higher than like a regular stock i9. I just don't think $750 is just kind of. I mean, there's like a lot better things in terms of computer hardware that you could buy you could spend $750 on, rather than just some one CPU that's technically already kind of outdated, because 14th gen is just 13th gen, and 13th gen was 2022 now. So, like, it's I don't know how I feel about it. The 7900 XT is like the 7900 XT being cheaper than this. Something's wrong with the CPU pricing. Speaking of that, there was something. Oh, you guys may be aware that here's something. Yeah, that's the other. That's a Tech Power Up article. So there was a launch of something earlier this week. The RX 7900 GRE. The GRE is now globally available. So I guess this is AMD's response to the RTX 40 series. This, coupled with kind of like minor price adjustments across the board, that is their response. So initially, the GRE was a China market exclusive, which launched, I think, last summer. So it's available worldwide now. But yeah, this is. You know what this makes me think of? This is basically this is like a return to form for AMD, in the sense that was it a decade ago? No, it's more than a decade. More than a decade ago, AMD did the same exact thing with the HD 7000 series. So it's ironic that this is a 7000 series GPU, because in 2012, I think it was 2012, AMD launched the HD. I have to remember the model number. The Radeon HD 7950 LE, or it was the Tahiti. They called it what do they call it? The Tahiti LE or the Pitcairn LE? Let me see if I can find it in Tech Power Up's GPU database. So the Radeon, the HD 7950. I think it was a 7950. Or no, it was a 70. Was it a 7870? Tahiti. Yeah, this. Okay, so this is basically what the GRE reminds me of. So years ago, AMD launched something called the HD 7970 Tahiti. It was Tahiti based, which means it was the large chip. So for those that are unfamiliar, think of Tahiti as like a 7900 XT and a 7900 XTX. And then think of the lower end one, which would be Pitcairn. Wait, was it Pitcairn? I think it was Pitcairn. HD 7870 gigahertz edition. Yes. Okay. So the GRE is kind of like this. So the HD Radeon 7870 Pitcairn edition. The Pitcairn was the smaller die. So this is kind of like a 7800 XT today. Notice how it's 7870. Pitcairn is the smaller die. See, this thing is 212 millimeters squared on 28 nanometers. Now, then they launched a special edition, ultra rare, secret rare Radeon HD 7870 XT, but it was actually the Tahiti die, which was the flagship die, which means it was the big 352 millimeter squared die. So you can see the specs right here, 1536 cores versus 1280 cores, 80 TMUs versus 96, 32 ROPS versus 32 ROPS. So I think it also had, okay, same amount of memory, 256-bit, 256-bit. So it's a little bit kind of not exactly the same. But when I first heard about the GRE, and particularly the price point that it's being sold at for like $550 right now, which is only like $50 more than the 7800 XT, I was thinking, you know, that is a lot like what they did back in 2012. I was right, 2012, November 2012, where they launched a special edition Tahiti. It was like a cut down Tahiti, which was smaller than the 7850. So if you guys, I guess, here, let me bring up Paint. So just to kind of draw this out, 7900 XTX, 7900 XT, 7900 GRE. So in the past, they used to have the 7970, was it the 7970 XT? No, they just called it the HD 7970, and then they had the HD 7950, and then they did this thing where there was like HD 7870, they called it the LE or something, or the Tahiti LE, because this one is Tahiti XL. And the top dog is the Tahiti XT. So we all know how that works out. Then they had like another one called the HD 7970 Gigahertz edition, which is basically the Tahiti. You can think of it like a Tahiti XTX. And I just messed that up really bad, so we'll just remove that one. Okay, so because down here we have, because after that you have a smaller die. You have 7800 XT and 7700 XT. Those are smaller dies. Well, down here, a decade ago, they had HD 7870 and they had HD 7850. So it's kind of like history is repeating itself in the sense that they're giving you the larger die, but at a much lower price, similar to what they did here, where they had a larger die, but they named it kind of an 800 series product. So this is kind of like what's happening today. In Call of Duty Minecraft, it'll be much faster than the 7800 XT and 4070. Yeah, well, here's the thing, guys. So here's what I would recommend. Like, if it was me, if I could get the 7900 GRE at that like $550 price, I would probably get that over the 7800 XT because it is the larger die, which means it's, so think of it like this. You can buy a 4-cylinder, you can buy an inline 4-cylinder engine, which is what these things are down here, or you could buy like a V6. You could buy a V6, which is basically these, or you can buy a 4-cylinder engine, which is these. So if they're both at a similar price point, I would get the V6. Let's put it that way. So that is the reason why all the reviews of the GRE have been pretty good, all things considered. Even Digital Foundry, which is typically very critical of AMD because they always put a heavy emphasis on ray tracing performance, even Digital Foundry recommends the 7900 GRE. So at the price point that it's at, it is actually very good value. It's actually currently the best value GPU on the market. So I don't think AMD has a ton of these. I think they had whatever excess stock from China, and then they're just going to throw it out into the global market. And then once these things are gobbled up, I don't know if they're going to be restocked because it was the same scenario with the 7870 Tahiti edition, because these other ones down here are the Pitcairn edition, which are the smaller ones. So it's kind of the same deal. Canada GRE prices are kind of icky. Really, what are they right now? AMD could use Samsung to fab the chips, but never did. Well, they're not going to use Samsung because Samsung is not that competitive with TSMC. That's why. Like, you have to think about it like this. AMD needs as much optimization on the node as possible to be competitive with nvidia. So if nvidia goes to Samsung, you basically get Ampere all over again. You get like high wattage for lower performance gain, which is essentially how, like, think about Ampere and Ada. Think about RTX 30 versus RTX 40. RTX 40 is the result of TSMC. RTX 30 is the result of Samsung. So there's not a huge difference. So think about it like this. The RTX 3060 is a Samsung node. The RTX 4060 is a TSMC node. But in terms of rasterization, they're not that different because NVIDIA kind of gimped you on the 40 series. But that's because TSMC is so much better, and they throw a bunch of cash on there with their new design that they're able to call it a day. And you basically get the same performance with less power consumption. So that's the main difference. Only reason that 40 series looked better is because it is TSMC. Yeah, that's the... Okay. 40 series is basically 30 series on TSMC with more cache. Like, basically, NVIDIA... What NVIDIA did, for those that don't know, when NVIDIA saw AMD doing, like, the... Put a bunch of cache on the CPU... Because actually, no, not the CPU... AMD put cache, kind of like what they did with the CPU. They increased the cache size on their RDNA 2 graphics cards. And that made them significantly better at the lower resolutions. So if you guys remember, when AMD 6000, so best example I can give you is RTX 3080 versus the Radeon RX 6800 XT. The 6800 XT was stronger in rasterization. So ignore ray tracing for a minute. Forget about ray tracing. Pretend that ray tracing doesn't exist. So there's only rasterization and there's power consumption. That's basically it. That's the only metric. So if we're grading these on rasterization and power consumption, who wins between these two? We all know the answer. This card uses less electricity, generates less heat, and is quieter. Also, this card has better rasterization. This is a TSMC GPU. This is a Samsung 8nm GPU. So that is the reason why this was better than the 3080. Now, couple that with the fact that it also had 16 gigabytes of memory versus 10 gigabytes on the 3080. And yes, I know some of the 3080s later on had 12, but who cares? 12 is still less than 16. So the point I'm making is TSMC's node is better. And if you go to, like, if you look at what NVIDIA did with the 40 series, they increased the cache. So they basically sort of copied what AMD did with RDNA 2. They threw more cache on there. Now, if you compare the 6800 XT to the 3080 at lower resolutions, the lower you go on the resolution, the wider the gap between these two cards. Meaning, at 1080p, 6800 XT is significantly greater, well, not significantly greater, but noticeably better than 3080. Whereas if you go to 1440p, the 3080 starts closing the distance and it almost matches up. In some cases it surpasses it, but it depends on the game. In this resolution, these cards are like more even. And then at 4K resolution, these cards are even, effectively. So what this shows is that the cache that AMD packed on RDNA 2, you can fit lower resolution pixel counts, texture information into the cache. As your resolution goes up, you need more cache, and there's not enough. So that's why the gain that the lead, I should say, that the 6800 XT had over the 3080 shrinks as you go up in resolution. Now, fast forward to the 40 series. 40 series is basically NVIDIA taking that same approach that AMD did with 6000. NVIDIA increased the cache on 40 series. So in that regard, they can get better performance at the lower resolutions. So, yeah, that's the reason why 40 series is able to give you similar performance numbers with less hardware than the 30 series. That's how a 4060 can match a 3060. The 3080 is faster than at 4K. I don't know about that. No, I don't think so. They go back and forth. That's why I say they're equal. But yeah, if it's VRAM limited, then it's slower. But yeah, in general, it's the same across the entire board for Ampere and like RDNA 2 in terms of scaling. So anyway, back to the GRE. So GRE is basically Tahiti LE kind of thing all over again. But yeah, it's very good value. Let me see. I'm looking at this specific review, which is the Nitro. I checked the local Micro Center nearby, and they actually have some of these. They already sold out of the Nitro. Like, this is the one that I recommend. Let me go and find the list. So there's the Pulse, this one. But yeah, any of these, this is like actually really good value, to be honest. Like this GPU, because if we look at, here, let me go back to that GPU, 7900 GRE. So if you look at where it lines up, see, so this is basically AMD's answer to the 4070 Super. The 4070 Super was really the only GPU that AMD had to do anything in terms of like an adjustment, because nothing else changes in terms of the narrative. Like if you look at this, like 4070 Ti Super, it's still slower than the 700 XT, although the gap has definitely shrunk significantly. And then the 4080 Super is also still a tad bit slower than the XTX. So like AMD didn't really need to do anything there. Although I do think with these two having the exact same MSRP at $1,000, yeah, the Nvidia one is offering. I would say the Nvidia one is offering better value, mainly because it does have better ray tracing, and at the higher end of the market, that is more important than it is at the lower end or the middle of the market. 16 gigabytes of VRAM on the 4080 Super is also that's a good enough, that's an acceptable amount at that price point of $1,000. But AMD is offering 24, so it's still offering more in that regard, but it doesn't really translate into tangible gains in the current gaming market, in the current gaming landscape, I should say. So yeah, I do kind of think the XTX is at a disadvantage. It also does consume about 50 watts more of electricity compared to the 4080, so it does lose in power, and it has worse ray tracing performance. So, but it does have more VRAM. So that's kind of the main. Those are the two different things. Like AMD wins in VRAM, but Nvidia wins in like the other things. So although AMD does not use that stupid 16-pin power connector, which is terrible, which I covered in another video. So there's that too, and I actually know at least 3 or 4 different individuals that I helped build computers, and they refused to go with the 16-pin connector, so they ended up with AMD cards. But anyway, that it is what it is. But yeah, so going back to the GRE, the 4070 Super was the only one that was a significant problem because it basically jumped in front of the 7800 XT, and although it was $100 more, so technically AMD could have left everything alone, but because they have the GRE available, it makes sense to launch it globally so that it can kind of, I guess, slow down the 4070 Super's sales, I guess. I don't really know how effective it will be, although it is very good value, though. So I feel like the 700 GRE is probably the smart man's choice if someone was looking at buying a graphics card. So that's what it looks to me. You shouldn't get a what? Hold on. What? Oh, okay. Justify from going. So I recommend blasting. I recommend you check out my video. Did you watch my video, by the way? If you're asking, help me justify going from that. Go back and watch my video. I have a video that will answer your question. The question, help me justify going from a 3080. Is that a 30? Oh, that's regular 3080. Yeah, that's. Go watch the video that I did. I did 3080 Ti versus 4080 Super. So go watch that video. Because the 3080 and the 3080 Ti, the 3080 Ti is a little bit faster. But if you go watch the video, you'll probably figure out the answer. And that video is not that long. From now on, for benchmark comparison videos, I'm not going to make those videos that long anymore. I'm just going to give you guys all the benchmarks within like a 2-minute window. And that's basically it. Okay, so yeah, definitely go watch the video, because the video is literally 3080 Ti versus 4080 Super. 320, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. You shouldn't get the 40. Well, he just needs to watch the video. He just needs to watch the video. The video will explain all of it. Yeah, you're right though. Like because the 3080 has more like brute force capability, I guess, more bandwidth. That's why at the higher resolutions, the cache doesn't make as much of a difference. And that's the reason why the 40 series, the mid-range and the entry-level 40 series cards will not age well compared to the higher end offerings. Or even like I guess, well, it remains to be seen how the AMD ones will do. AMD's cards are kind of weird because sometimes, like, when you think that they should not do well, they do well for some reason. Like, the best example I can give you is the 5700 XT can somehow handle a game that that requires mesh shaders, whereas a 1080 Ti, which is supposed to be faster than a 5700 XT, can't even handle it at all. So weird stuff like that sometimes happens with the AMD cards, where they actually somehow manage to pull through when the nvidia ones fall flat. You know what I find kind of funny though? According to Tech Power Up, now granted it's only like 1%, but the 7900 GRE is 1% slower than a 6950 XT. A 6950 XT is about the same as a 7900 GRE. So technically what that means is that if you take a GRE, a 3080 Ti, and a 6950 XT and put them all together, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Because it's almost like it's within margin of error. It's like 1% difference between those three cards. So, yeah, I think this is probably the best value, though. Like, it doesn't really use much power either, from what I remember reading. So, AMD cards sometimes brute force things they shouldn't be able to do. Yeah. You put a custom BIOS on 1080, perform like that, minus the extra, it's a little slower. Like, yeah, but the thing is, I don't know what resolution you're talking about, because, you know, people are saying that the spec for the PCI 5 isn't changing. They should. It's not a bad idea. So they already changed it, so it's not changing. It already changed. They have to maintain compatibility with the existing cards, so you can't just like make a brand new cable and then now everyone who has the old design are SOL. Like, that's not how it works. So yeah, they've already updated it. I already covered that in a different live stream, and I think we also covered that in a video. I think I did a whole video about that. Like back when I covered the 40 series. Okay. So yeah, this, and then the leaks about this 14900KS. I mean, these are like the only new hardware things, I guess. Like, there's really nothing happening, guys. Like, PC hardware, enthusiast class hardware, it's, if you're into that stuff, you're just gonna be sitting around waiting for like the second half of the year. There's really nothing worth talking about. Like, you could tell I'm grasping at straws when we're having to talk about a leaked article of a 14900KS, because this is supposed to be something that you're supposed to be super excited about, you know, slash sarcasm. What else? Oh, there's a lot of video game stuff to talk about, and I know this channel does cover gaming as well. Not as much as technology, but when there's no technology worth talking about, I mean, then I end up talking about gaming. That's usually how it works. I don't know. I don't know, blasting. I don't know if that's a good idea. Because my conclusion, well, okay, my conclusion is like, if you're going to like 4K, then the 4080 Super sort of makes sense, but then even then it's still gonna sort of be underpowered and you're gonna have to rely on upscaling. Whereas if you're at 1440p, I think you should wait. I think you should wait for the next generation. I don't think anybody who's on 1080p or 1440p, who's on 30 series today, especially like the higher end of the 30 series, like 3080 Ti, for example, I don't think you should be considering the 40 series at all at this point. Like, if you're at 1440p. Now, if you're at 4K resolution, that's a different story, because, well, even then, you know, part of me also wants to say it's probably not worth upgrading, because it really just kind of depends. Because you're talking about 1440p, and It's not. It's actually not that much less power draw. It is less power draw, but it's not that much less power draw. I'm assuming you watched the video. If you watched the video, you would have seen the differences. But see, here's the thing. This is the reason why I don't think 1440p. Like, okay, 1440p, the 3080 Ti is still good. Like at 1440p, the 3080 Ti is fine. That's the reason why, if you have no intention of upgrading your monitor, I don't think you should bother with the 40 series. You should just ignore it and skip that generation. Because the actual, so for someone who has an 70 or an 80 class GPU, they typically skip every other generation. So if someone is on 10 series, they would go to 30 series. If someone is on 20 series, they would go to 40 series. If someone's on 30 series, they should be thinking about 50 series, not 40 series. You see what I'm saying? Because if you go to 40 series now, you're going to get one of those feels bad moments later this year when the 50 series comes out. Think of the people who bought the 3080 Ti like less than half a year later, or was it half a year later? Well, it was like, okay, basically the point is the 3090 Ti launched in the same year that the 4090 launched. And the people who bought the 3090 Ti when it was new, think of it like right now, the Super Series is new. 2 years ago, the 3090 Ti was brand new. 2 years ago, it was brand new. It was the fastest GPU, the 3090 Ti. And you know what its MSRP was? $2,000. You know what people actually spent to buy one during this time 2 years ago because of scalpers? Close to $3,000. Now, those exact same people who spent like anywhere from $2,500 to $3,000 on a 3090 Ti, they must have felt screwed over by nvidia and the entire market pretty badly later that year when the 4090 launched, and it launched at $1,600, down $400 MSRP from the 3090 Ti. So those people got screwed over really bad. So those people must have had a lot of buyer's remorse. So that's the reason why we know that the 50 series is coming later this year. This is guaranteed 100% Q4. It's already known. You don't need to go watch any leaks. You don't need to go watch anything. I can already prove it to you without even knowing any internal stuff from nvidia. So I know for a fact the 50 series is coming this year. Like, okay, not fact, like nobody from nvidia has told me that the 50 series is coming out this year. But I know by making educated guesses based off of previous hardware. And if you're new to the channel, I can prove it to you, but I don't think we need to do that because I think most of my long-term viewers know exactly what I'm going to do to prove that the 50 series is coming out this year. But that's the reason why. The point is, like, if you're on 3080 Ti or 3080 or 3090, any of those high-end Ampere cards, the 40 series is not for you. There is a new generation coming later this year, and you are probably going to want to stick around for that and save your money for that. Because I have no idea what the new 50 series will be priced at. That I don't know. I know it's coming. I don't know how much it will cost. So that's all I can say on that. At this point, this person is getting a 40 series for ray tracing or AI workloads. Wait, who? Uh, 50, what? There was talk that they would launch 50 series at CES. Who said CES? What, are you talking about CES next year? Okay, now, do I have to do this? Okay, do I have to go and prove when these GPUs are coming out again for the probably 4th or 5th time now? Yeah, CES next year. Okay. Yes. I think they're still hoarding these GPUs for mining. What? Yeah. No, I think we're good on that. But the thing is, so, okay, 2025 is the year of the 50 series. So keep that in mind. What year was the year of the 40 series? Last year, 2023. So a new generation of GPUs gets introduced at the tail end of an even numbered year. And that usually includes the highest end offering and like the second fastest one. Sometimes the third fastest one. Which means that the immediate subsequent odd numbered year will see the entire product lineup get refreshed. So that means your 70, your 60 Ti, your 60, your 50, your 50 Ti, all your mobile products, all your laptop GPUs, all that stuff comes out the following year. So what that means is if 5090 and 5080 come out in Q4 of 2024, what do you think is going to come out in 2025? The entire rest of the 50 series. Your 60 Ti, 70 Ti, if there's a 50, all the mobile GPUs, all that stuff is coming next year. So when they talk about like CES and all that, which we know is January of next year, that is your 70 Ti, your 60, your 60 Ti, all the rumors around those GPUs, that's all next year. I thought there was someone here who was considering jumping from. There was, and no. There was no one in here. No. It's 3080 Ti to 4080 Super. I have a video showcasing those two GPUs in a direct comparison. And eventually I'll do the 7900 XTX one. In fact, I already have all the benchmark data. I just need to edit the video and put it online. So I do have that one as well. See, I don't like to show like one GPU and then like a whole bunch of GPUs. I think that confuses everybody. I mean, it doesn't confuse everybody. It's hard to sift through the noise, so to speak. Whereas if you put one GPU versus another GPU, or maybe like 3 or 4 GPUs max in a comparison, I think that's a better way to sit down and like really kind of look at the GPU as a whole versus like that GPU and then like a whole laundry list of GPUs, including all these low-end GPUs and ancient GPUs that if someone's considering like a 4080, for example, do they even care what a 2060 or like a 1080 from like 2016 compares or it runs at? I mean, unless they themselves have that GPU, maybe. But I feel like someone who had a 1080 probably would have upgraded to a 3080 or something in those lines at some point previously. So it should, but we don't know for sure other than what? Oh, it's Battle Mage. Yes, it is. It is. Well, I don't know when. Like Intel, okay, out of all of them, Intel's probably the greatest mystery at this point, but I would imagine Intel's GPU will come out in like Q3, sometime between the second part of Q3 and the first part of Q4 is when I would expect Battle Mage. If Battle Mage doesn't show up in that window, then either it is terribly delayed due to some significant problem, or it launches early for some reason, which I highly doubt. Imagine Intel drops a bombshell at Computex. We already know Intel's... well, okay, we don't know much about the CPU. The CPU stuff is the stuff that's sort of questionable, like how that's going to play out, but the GPU, we already know how fast it is, or how fast it's supposed to be. Some people seem to be a little bit too optimistic in terms of what they think the Intel GPU is going to perform at. I think they need to temper their expectations because they're probably setting themselves up for disappointment. TSMC kind of outs their future orders. Yeah. Yeah, well, Zen 5, I've been saying since last year. I've been saying for almost a year ago now that Zen 5 is going to come out in the summer of 2024. That's what I said, and I still stand by that. I'm still gonna say Zen 5 is coming in Q3 of this year. It will not be at the end of the year, like some people seem to think. So think of it like, okay, here's how I think Zen 5 is gonna go down. Actually, let's bring up Paint again, I guess, because we're gonna do the timeline thing again. Okay, let's remove this stuff. We don't need the 4-cylinder engine analogy anymore. We'll just remove all the GRE stuff. So here's what I think is going to happen. So we have Q1, which goes till like what here, and then Q2, 3, and 4. So I think Q2. So June is like the last month. So Computex is like June. It's like what, early June every year? I bet you Zen 5 is announced around Computex. And I bet Lisa Sue's going to get on stage and be like, "Okay, available." She's either going to say like someday in July or August. Like that's my guess. If it goes to September, then it's still Q3. So basically what I'm telling you guys, Zen 5 is the big thing happening in Q3. Is Q3. That's like basically Q3. It's all going to be about Zen 3 or Zen 5. So that means all the big YouTubers that are going to get all the review samples, all the new motherboards, all your flagship Crosshair, your Aorus Master, your Aorus Extreme, your ASRock Taichi, all the big X8, what is it, X870E. The new chipset is coming. X870E, X870, B850? These are all going to launch in the summer. Yeah. All this stuff is coming in the summer. Like, basically, all the content, all the, like, big TechTuber content throughout the summer, it's all going to be, like, front-loaded heavy with Zen 5. It's going to be motherboard overviews, motherboard reviews, CPU reviews, gaming benchmarks that are CPU bottleneck scenarios, all that kind of stuff. That's what the entire summer is going to be filled with. I can already tell. Memory overclocking, DDR5, 8,000, 10,000, whatever it ends up being able to do. Like, that's what all the content's going to be about. Because we're not getting any GPU content until the back end of the year. So that's Zen 5's window. Like, Q3 equals Zen 5. So that's, yeah, I bet it's going to get announced at Computex in June, and then all that stuff comes out in the summer, like over the course of 3 months. 90 days, all that stuff's going to play out. So meanwhile, at the start of the year, RTX 40 Super. That's it. Okay, and the Ryzen 8700G and, all this other stuff. So and don't forget the RX 7600 XTs, a strangely named GPU. Like, that's basically Q1. So I guess the people who don't pay attention, they're the ones that are probably buying this stuff. the ones who are going to have buyer's remorse when, like, all the new next gen stuff comes out in the second half of the year. So yeah, this is the stuff that's kind of interesting, but not really if you're an enthusiast and you're waiting for the latest and greatest. So Q2, there's really Nothing. Like, what is coming out in Q2? This? The 14900KS is like probably a Q2 thing, if I had to guess. Like, that's the thing that, like, I guess Intel always does that. I mean, we just talked about the leaked article. Some Vietnamese retailer, somebody leaked the box packaging of this. So we know this is coming out. Probably, I mean, this might even be out next month. So this might even be like a Q1 thing. We just throw it here with this stuff. Steam Deck killers is it in Q2? USB 4 native support is the big thing with the new chipset. Maybe from the USB 4 it goes direct to CPU. I don't know if desktop's gonna have that. That sounds like a mobile thing. So trust me, I know a lot about USB 4. So USB 4 on desktop works very different than USB 4 on laptop. USB 4 on laptop is native. In fact, Zen 4 on mobile already has it. And then Intel, does Intel? I think Intel has it too on mobile, but not on desktop, not natively. So the way it works on desktop USB 4 is done via chipset, or via via a chipset, a controller. So USB 4. So here's the thing, guys. So let's talk about X670E, and then we'll compare to B or X870E, because apparently they're skipping 700. So this one, how does this do USB 4? How does USB 4 work on X670E today? Now, am I asking a trick question? Let's see who actually knows the answer. Let's see if you guys actually know the answer to this. How does USB 4 work on X670E today? No, Amulet, it has nothing to do with Thunderbolt. Well, okay, it does, but we can talk about Intel too, because it's the same exact story. There's actually no difference. Controller chip to chipset. You don't know, you only have USB 3.2 at the most. Okay. So there are, let me give you guys an example. Well, first of all, what are some motherboards? Can you guys name some motherboards that have USB 4? Royal's actually giving the answer for the 870, not the 670. Okay, so I'm going to list off some. Crosshair. Okay, X670E Crosshair Extreme. This $1,000 motherboard from Asus features full USB 4 support in the motherboard. Yeah, so RK is starting to list it off. Okay, here comes another one. X670E Crosshair Hero. It also has native USB 4 via a chipset. And we'll talk about that chipset in a little bit, because I have lots of videos on this topic. So I know a whole lot about USB 4. So next, we'll list another Asus. X670, is it X670? X670E Pro Art Creator. All of these are Asus boards. These are Asus boards that have native USB 4 and they're AMD motherboards. And they support Thunderbolt 3, I might add. Okay, now. Yes, ASRock. ASRock X670E Taichi. Also, the ASRock B650E Taichi also supports native USB. So, this one also has it. So it's not just the X670E. You can also get USB 4 today on a B650E motherboard. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I know those have it. I think those are the only ones. Well, okay. These are the ones that I know of off the top of my head, these first three are all Asus. These other two are ASRock. Gigabyte Aorus Master supports USB for the use of an add-in card. Yeah, I have a video on that. Okay, and I actually have that. I have that card. In fact, I have all the Thunderbolt cards. That's how I know all of this. So here's the thing: Asus and ASRock feature AMD Zen 4 motherboards today since the launch. Because guys, these motherboards, at least the X670E, these have been around since September of 2022. They have featured USB 4 support since that long ago. It's been more than a year at this point. So there are a bunch of motherboards. These are built-in USB 4 / Thunderbolt 3 support. Aren't Asus and maybe, I don't know. So are you talking about the chipset? What's Pegatron brands? So there are a bunch of motherboards that have optional USB 4 Thunderbolt 3 via add-in card. There's a whole bunch of motherboards. There's an even larger category or a longer list of motherboards that support USB 4 or Thunderbolt 3 on AMD via an add-in card. There's a lot. The list is too long for me to list all of them, but I will list some notable, some notable ones. So X670E Aorus Master and Extreme, and the Elite. All of the Gigabyte boards that have the Aorus branding typically will support USB 4 add-in card via the card. So in fact, I have a YouTube video showing how to add USB 4 / Thunderbolt. I think the video is called "How to Add Thunderbolt to AMD," but anyway, it's USB 4. It's the same thing. So those have it. The Steel Legend from ASRock support adding cards. There's a whole bunch of Asus ones. So basically, the Asus, the Strix motherboards support the add-in card. The TUF series supports the add-in card. So there's like a whole bunch. So basically, USB 4 can be added to all these motherboards that do not have it built in via the add-in card, which is using the Intel JHL 8540 Thunderbolt 4 controller. This is the chip. This is the chip that makes this possible on X670E today. Meaning, if you own any of these motherboards, these AMD motherboards, all have an Intel JHL 8540 Thunderbolt 4 controller literally soldered on to the motherboard. All of these motherboards that we just listed. If you have one of these optional, basically if you have one of these motherboards that support the add-in card, that means you have to buy an Intel JHL 8540 based Thunderbolt add-in card to add support or to add USB 4 support to your motherboard. Thunderbolt 4 over PCI directly to CPU? No, not necessarily. It can. It depends. It depends on the motherboard. For example, the Tai Chi. We'll use this one as an example. This motherboard from ASRock, the Thunderbolt 4 controller goes directly to the CPU. However, another motherboard, for example, this Asus Crosshair Hero and Extreme, These, the Thunderbolt controller is not directly to the CPU. It actually traverses through the chipset, the motherboard chipset, before it gets to the CPU. So for example, if I show you guys this, if we just draw out, the CPU is here on the motherboard, the Intel Thunderbolt chipset would be like here on the motherboard. If it's soldered, it would be there. On the ASRock, the wire traces go directly to the CPU. But if it's on the Asus Crosshair, it actually goes into the chipset first. So the chipset is over here, and there's actually two of them because X670E is actually two B650 chipsets combined or daisy chained. So if you have an Asus Crosshair Hero, the Thunderbolt controller actually goes into the chipset before it goes into the CPU. So that is a difference in design. Asus runs their Thunderbolt controller into the chipset before going into the CPU, whereas ASRock pushes the Thunderbolt controller or wires the Thunderbolt controller directly into the AMD CPU socket. So that is a difference in design. That is the reason why there are significant differences in motherboards, and that's why I did that tier list video. Is there an M.2 solution for Thunderbolt 4? No, there isn't. Yeah, I think I know what you're asking. You're asking, is there an M.2 form factor for an add-in card? As of today, there is not. There could be, though, because if you guys think about it, what is the requirement for the Intel JHL 8540? So the JHL 8540 TB4/USB 4 controller is PCIe Gen 3 X4. This is the hardware requirement for Thunderbolt 4 from Intel. It requires 4 lanes of PCIe Gen 3. So think about an M.2. An M.2 drive uses typically 4 lanes. It could be Gen 3. If it's Gen 3, then it's a Gen 3 drive. If it's Gen 4, it's a Gen 4 drive. So it really only needs 4 lanes of Gen 3, which means, in theory, there could be a Thunderbolt 4 add-in card that uses an M.2 form factor. It would work like U.2, M.2 for U.2 drives. Well, I mean, it could, but it doesn't need to. You could just build it. You could just put the Intel chip on a what looks like a M.2 SSD, and then just plug that into an M.2 slot, and it should work. As long as the interface matches up in terms of the voltages, that's really all that matters, because it will communicate via PCIe with the CPU. So yeah, that is the reason why, if you have one of these fancy Asus Crosshair motherboards, either the Hero or the Extreme, you can connect external monitors directly to your motherboard via the USB 4 port. You have to have a USB-C cable, but as long as you have a USB-C cable to either DisplayPort on the monitor or a USB-C cable to USB-C, if the monitor supports USB-C via DisplayPort alt mode, that will work. You can literally drive your monitor using your Ryzen integrated graphics off of the motherboard using this Intel chip. So that's how USB 4 works via existing AMD motherboards. So what exactly? Okay, let's kind of explain. Well, this is probably going to turn into its own like YouTube clipped video, because this is like a whole thing on Thunderbolt. So Intel Intel donated Thunderbolt 3 specification to, I don't know who they donated to. I guess the USB SIG group or whoever the governing body is for the standards for USB. Like Intel basically donated Thunderbolt 3 spec to USB. And henceforth, USB 4 was made. That is how USB 4 was made, in a nutshell. Intel donated Thunderbolt 3, and Thunderbolt 3 was renamed USB 4. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's basically what it is. So, this is the reason why I can take an AMD Live Gamer Bolt external 4K 60 capture card, which requires Thunderbolt 3. It literally says it must use Thunderbolt 3. You cannot use it on USB. It's a USB-C based capture card. I can plug it in to my USB 4 port on my motherboard, on an AMD motherboard, and it works. It works fine. So, Thunderbolt 3 and USB 4 are fully backwards compatible. USB 4 specification requires something called PCIe tunneling. PCIe tunneling is a specification of Thunderbolt. It is a significant differentiation between Thunderbolt and normal USB-C. Normal USB-C, so USB 3.2, USB 3.2 Gen 2x2, 2x1, whatever, USB 3.1 Gen 1, you name it, all the USB 3 and everything older, none of that supports PCIe tunneling. And that is the reason why you can't take a Thunderbolt device, plug it into a USB-C port on a motherboard or a laptop, and expect it to work. It just won't work. It requires something called PCIe tunneling, and that is something that USB 4 inherited from Thunderbolt 3. Does eGPU work on desktops? Over what? What's the question? Does it work on desktops? The answer is yes, it does, but it requires Thunderbolt or whatever specification that eGPU requires. The motherboard has to have that support. So if the motherboard supports USB 4 and your eGPU requires Thunderbolt 3, for example, it will work. Yes, the answer is it will work. I have videos showcasing this. I don't have the eGPU example, but I have showcased Thunderbolt 3 devices working over USB 4 ports. And the motherboard that I use to demonstrate this is actually this one here. The X670E Aorus Master from Gigabyte, which is the motherboard that we are streaming from right now. I have a Gigabyte Thunderbolt card installed and it gives me USB 4 support, and I can run Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 devices over the card perfectly fine. Now, I don't have an external GPU, so I can't say that. I haven't tested it, but I assume if it requires Thunderbolt, and you plug it into USB 4, it will work. So, okay, so that is USB 4. That is how USB 4 works on the current implementation of what exists today. So now let's talk about X870E. So let's bring this out here. X870E is going to be different because when this chipset launches later this year, it is not going to feature the Intel JHL 8540 chipset, meaning all of these flagship motherboards, or I guess, well, not all of them are flagship, but yeah, pretty much most of them are flagship, except for this ProArt Creator. But, you know, all these motherboards on the left here, they all feature the Intel JHL controller. So they all have Thunderbolt 4. They all have USB 4, basically because they have a Thunderbolt controller soldered onto them. Now, what is going to actually change with the new chipset? So the new chipset, the flagship motherboards will feature, I'm going to use quotes, native USB 4 support. I'm using this in quotes because what they actually mean is that they will feature USB 4 in a very similar manner in that these motherboards, these older motherboards from the last generation, support Thunderbolt 4, or I guess I keep saying Thunderbolt, USB 4. So these guys already have USB 4. So what is actually changing then? Well, this is possible due to a chipset change. There's a new chipset. A new chipset will be utilized to allow or to enable USB 4 on these new motherboards. That chipset is not made by Intel. It is made by a company called AMD. And that chipset is called the ASM 4242. This is the new successor to the old Intel JHL 8540. Now, it's not really a direct successor because obviously it's a different vendor making the chipset. But really what was supposed to happen, the ASM from AMD for USB 4 was supposed to come out like 3 years ago at this point. But for some reason, there was some kind of delay. I don't know where the delay or what was the cause of the delay. It could have been the supply shortages. It could have been like some internal testing, firmware, whatever they were doing. The 4242 is basically the replacement to the Intel JHL 8540. So USB 4 will be handled on these newer motherboards via AMD, whereas USB 4 was handled on the older, the Zen 4 based motherboards, so X670 and all the current generation stuff via the Intel JHL. So that is the change. So when they say native support, they actually mean that it's just going to have an AMD chip soldered on the motherboard. So not all of them will feature USB 4. Some of them will be optional via add-in card, just like these examples here. The difference is these new add-in cards will be branded USB 4 add-in cards, not Thunderbolt add-in cards, because all of the quote-unquote USB 4 add-in cards for the old motherboards or the current generation, they're actually Thunderbolt add-in cards. They're Thunderbolt add-in cards because they literally feature the Intel Thunderbolt 4 controller. So that is what is changing. Oculink is kind of old spec and should... What is Oculink? What is that? Oh, that's... You're making me think of like a VR headset. What is that? Is it something for eGPU? Oculink these days. Some eGPU use Oculink these days. That one, I don't know what Oculink is. I've never heard of it. That'd be tough to find for desktop. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Thunderbolt 5 is interesting, but Thunderbolt 5 is more of like a mobile thing. So that's going to be more like a laptop thing. Oculink is basically PCIe lane on a cable. Isn't that PCIe tunneling? Or is that like an optical cable? I don't know what that is. Thunderbolt cables already feature PCIe tunneling, though. So any official Thunderbolt cable. In fact, do I have one here? Oh yeah, I've got one right here. Yeah. This is a Thunderbolt cable. See the lightning bolt? This is a Thunderbolt 3 cable with the USB-C form factor. This is a Thunderbolt 3 cable, guys. Like, I use this with my AMD Live Gamer Bolt external 4K 60 capture card. It's not that long. It's relatively short Thunderbolt 3 cable. I plug this in to my AMD motherboard and it works. So, via the add-in card. So, okay. Yeah, so this thing is Oculink. Because I can tell you, like, if I were to take that capture card, and if I were to plug it in using this is a regular USB-C. In fact, this is a PlayStation 5 USB-C cable for charging my DualSense controller. This thing, I can charge my phone. I can connect my phone to my PC using this because this is just USB-C. This is USB-C. Whereas this, with a little fancy lightning bolt symbol, this is Thunderbolt. They may look the same because they both have the USB-C form factor. The plug is the same, but they're definitely not the same. The pinouts, the Thunderbolt one uses a different pinout design, so. Use a lot in servers. We got phased out. Oh, it's an optical cable. Okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Those have like a thick... There's like a thick thing here. It's like a thicker part of this because it's got the laser in there. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay. Is 4X the max links available for the USB-C form factor cables forever? I don't know. I don't know what is. I don't know if I understand the question. 4X the max links available? Oh, you mean 4 lanes of PCIe? Yes. Yes. Because that is Thunderbolt spec. Thunderbolt spec is 4 lanes of PCIe Gen 3. Actually, I think one of the things that is different, the JHL 8540 is PCIe Gen 3 X4 lanes. The ASMedia, the ASM 4242, I believe, is PCIe Gen 4 X4. But I don't really think that translates into any significant difference because I think the device peripherals, if they're all USB 4 based devices, it's like 40 gigabit regardless. So maybe that means you can run like 2 USB 4 ports off the same add-in card, or I guess off the same controller at full bandwidth. Whereas I know on the old Thunderbolt 4 controller, you could really only do one of them at full throughput. The other one would not. Like, as soon as you plug the second one in, I think it's gonna like cut the bandwidth in half for both ports. Yeah, that would be something interesting to check. But I don't know too much about the ASM. One thing, I think I talked about this. So it's already on its way. I expect these to be out in the market soon. So just to kind of show this, Asus has a USB 4 PCIe Gen 4 card, dual USB 4 with DisplayPort 1.4. So it allows you to do DisplayPort, dual USB 4, up to 5 USB 4 devices in a daisy chain, 40 gigabit bi-directional bandwidth for super fast data transfers and video output. This, I can't wait until Asus launches this card, because this is going into my Threadripper PC as soon as this thing is available. Guaranteed. Oh, okay. My expansion card is an ASM. Okay, yeah, that's a USB 3. So this card from Asus features the ASM 4242. And here's the thing. The new motherboards that are going to accompany Zen 5 this summer, some of those motherboards, most likely the expensive flagship motherboards, will include this ASM 4242 soldered on to the motherboard, or they might feature this in the box. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, that is something that I'm looking forward to because I do plan to use this with Threadripper. The Gigabyte Threadripper motherboard includes the Intel JHL 8540. So the Gigabyte motherboard for Threadripper already has the Intel Thunderbolt 4 chip. So it has USB 4 support. Whereas Asus has kind of annoyed me. Asus has, they have actually used a firmware level lock so that I cannot use my Asus Thunderbolt EX4. My Thunderbolt 4 card does not work with my Threadripper motherboard artificially because Asus locked it out. In fact, Asus did a BIOS update recently that completely, it made it so that when I plug in this card to my Threadripper motherboard, the Windows doesn't even detect that it exists. It's not even present. So I have to roll back the BIOS to get it to come back. But then even then, Asus locks down PCI tunneling. So this is not an Intel thing. This is not an AMD thing. This is an Asus being Asus thing. This is an Asus anti-consumer thing where because they didn't validate this for my Threadripper board, they're going to artificially lock down the ability to use it with that board. That is really anti-consumer because at least Gigabyte and ASRock, who also have their own Thunderbolt 4 cards, at least they'll let me use their Thunderbolt cards on their motherboards. But they don't have if they don't have official support, I can't open a support ticket if something's not working correctly and complain to them because they'll just tell me, oh, it's not supported. But at least they'll let me use it. Whereas Asus is I don't want you opening a support ticket. So yeah. Wendell from Level 1 Text might have worked some custom firmware on this issue. No, I know what you're talking about. That was years ago. That was a different thing. This is a new thing because I'm talking about the latest Thunderbolt or the latest Threadripper motherboard from Asus. The new TRX 50 Sage. But the WRX 90 Sage, the one for the Threadripper Pro, that one features the new AMD 4242 chipset for USB 4. So I think it's some weird thing where I think Asus's dev team, they're doing all their testing with USB 4 and the AMD version, so they don't want to troubleshoot and I guess co-develop support for Thunderbolt 4 spec on their newer motherboards. I think that's what's going on. So, it's kind of annoying, but yeah. And then here's the thing. You can check the support page. If we go to the manual, compatibility, the manual. All right, here's the manual, the user guide. Actually, that's not what I want. What am I doing? That's not what I want at all. I want to find... compatible. Age of Oblivion just subscribed. If you're in the chat, thanks for the sub. This is not what I wanted. This is the... What is this? This is... Okay, this is the manual. I'm looking for the compatibility list. Oh, this is the compatibility list. Okay. Okay, look. Check it out, guys. Here we go. This is it. These are the motherboards today that support this card. Notice that they're all new motherboards. This is the motherboard that I have. The Asus Pro WS TRX 50 Sage Wi-Fi. supports this USB 4 card. Now the problem is you can't buy this card. They're not like sourcing this anywhere yet. So, and then they've added these Intel, which is ironic because Intel's supposed to have Thunderbolt 4. So why are they putting USB 4 on Intel's motherboards? So that's kind of weird. But these are the newer motherboards because this is Z790. Notice it's like the Max, the Apex Encore. It's like Encore. It's like all the newer ones. And then they have B760 as well. And then H770. So there's no AMD. There's no like Zen 4 Ryzen motherboards that support PCI USB 4 from Asus as of today. So meaning if you want USB 4 on like a Zen 4 motherboard, you got to go with the Intel Thunderbolt 4 card. But if you want like USB 4 on the new Intel motherboard, you got to go with the unreleased USB 4 card. Like that is really weird. So it's like I think they should do it the other way around, but whatever. That's Asus being Asus. You've always been curious, what exactly does the Thunderbolt expansion port do? Power and data comes from the PCIe slot, not the pinout on the board. No, it does provide power. So hold on, like this. You're talking about this. So if you plug in, okay. Well, I shouldn't have closed out the manual. Here, let me just go into this. Yeah, all of those questions that you're asking, they can be answered from this. So, okay. So this is the USB 4 card. Now, remember, guys, USB 4, Thunderbolt 4 is all basically the same thing. The one difference is in order for a device to carry the Thunderbolt logo, it has to have Intel's validation, which means if the vendor wants to sell a Thunderbolt logo or a Thunderbolt branded product, they have to go through a validation process with Intel to get it to be signed off. So if they don't want to do that, it's going to be called USB 4. That's basically what this is. But this one's using the ASM 4242. So, okay, we're going to explain what all of these are. So, number one, that is the USB 4 port, basically Thunderbolt 3 compatible. And it also is somewhat forwards compatible with Thunderbolt 4. DisplayPort input, these are if you want to connect your, for example, a graphics card. You can plug the graphics card into this USB 4 card via the DisplayPort input. And then what that means is you'll have to take the Thunderbolt, or I guess the USB 4 cable, and plug that into your monitor via USB-C form factor, and then you'll get the output from your graphics card through this card out on your monitor. That's what that's for. All right, now, number three. Number three is the 6-pin PCIe. This is if you want, I believe it's like 60 watts of power. Yes, 60 watts quick charge feature. If you want to use the 60 watts out of this USB-C form factor USB 4 port, this supports 60 watts of power through this cable. It has to be a certified USB 4 cable that supports quick charge feature functionality to be able to make use of that 60 watt power delivery through the add-in card. So that is what number 3 is. That's if you want the quick charge feature. Because if you don't plug the PCIe power in there, then you're only going to get, your standard slow charge for your cell phone, that kind of thing. What I meant to say, the header ports on the motherboard, what do they do? Okay, yeah, we're getting there. So number 4. Number 4 is USB signaling backwards compatibility. So number 4 uses a USB 2.0 header on the motherboard. So that means if you plug, say, if I take if I just take this cable or a USB-C cable and I plug that into the USB 4 port, if the device I'm connecting to, the external device, like for example, if I plug in, this, a DualSense controller. If I plug this in, this is not a USB 4 device. This is a standard USB 3. I think it's USB 3. This will, the USB 4 controller will be like, hey, this device that's connected is not a USB 4 capable device. It does not need PCI tunneling. Therefore, it's going to route it to the pins on number 4 for USB. Standard USB connectivity is maintained via the pinouts on number 4 here. Now, number 5. Number 5 is the proprietary cable that the motherboard manufacturer uses to negotiate the full USB 4 signaling capability. Basically, what port 5 or what this connector, this cable port 5 does is it provides the ability to do the extra features that USB 4 requires, but USB 3, I should say, or I guess legacy USB does not require. So what do I mean by that? Security authentication levels. You can program security functionality, meaning if you, like, let's say somebody plugs in a device to the card, but you don't want to authorize that device instantly to be able to have access to your computer, or you don't want to have instant access to that device from your computer, you can specify security settings. These are firmware level security settings that you can configure in the BIOS of your motherboard if they so choose to enable that functionality. I know for a fact that Gigabyte uses this level of security in their BIOS for USB 4 today. I don't know about Asus. Obviously, I don't have this card on hand, but it depends on the vendor. I can tell by looking at port 5 that this is an Asus. I think it's like a 14-pin or 16-pin connector. It's because Gigabyte and ASRock use the standard 5-pin header cable. So, yeah, it's basically used for control plane signaling for USB 4 or Thunderbolt functionality. And a lot of what I'm talking about was Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 specification settings that are completely optional, but that's what port 5 is for. I guess the header cable that goes from the card to the motherboard. In theory, it should work without it. But most motherboard manufacturers, because they want you to buy their specific card, and they also want you to use it with their specific motherboard, like they don't want you, like, okay, Asus doesn't want you buying their card and plugging it into a Gigabyte, ASRock, or MSI motherboard. So they probably have some extra custom firmware in this card, like some kind of little microcontroller, FPGA, or ASIC, or whatever, that is basically wanting to do a handshake with the Asus motherboard over port 5. And because of that, you cannot use this card, I would assume, with a non-Asus motherboard. So the header cable is also used for vendor lock-in purposes, if that makes sense. That sounds horrible to say that, but that's basically what that is. If only they had a front panel connector on the card as well. Front panel? What do you mean by front panel? Oh, you mean... Yeah, but... I can see what you're saying, but what would that do? Because, see, this is looking for something from the motherboard. The front panel connectors on the motherboard are looking for they're going to output. They're going to output. So it's like, why would you need that here? If that makes sense, because this is not USB. This is, I mean, it's backwards compatible with USB, but it's supposed to be USB 4. So, yeah. So yeah, it's a 14-pin header, USB 4 header. They're calling it USB 4 header, but it's also there for like DRM purposes, basically vendor lock-in, because the 14-pin is an Asus thing. Gigabyte doesn't use that, and neither does ASRock, and I don't even know what MSI uses because MSI doesn't even have a Thunderbolt 4 card. MSI does have a USB 4 card though, which will also be featured with some of these new AMD motherboards. MSI was the one vendor that did not offer any USB 4 with the previous generation. So if you wanted USB 4 / Thunderbolt 3, you basically were forced to go Asus, ASRock, or Gigabyte. If every PCIe slot, no matter if it's this, they all supply up to... Yes, but they don't normally... The thing is, Yeah, that's a good question, but realistically, rarely do PCIe devices ever use that much power from the slot. They don't normally do that. They can, but they don't normally do that. So, yeah, it does require... Notice how it says it requires X4. Notice how it requires an X4 interface. Oh, and notice also, the ASMedia... This further confirms that I was correct in what I said earlier. It says here, PCIe 4.0, that's Gen 4, 4 lanes. So this PCIe 4 add-in card requires 4 lanes of Gen 4. The old Thunderbolt 4 add-in card only required 4 lanes of Gen 3. So this is a difference. Meaning you can't run this with PCIe Gen 3. Which means you're going to need one of them, like, yeah, pretty much a higher end. Okay, that explains a lot of things. That explains why only these Intel motherboards work. Because the other Intel Z790 boards and the older boards, they only had Gen 3 on their X4 slots. And that's the reason why you cannot use this USB 4 with those older Z790 motherboards. Okay, that makes sense. It's a platform limitation. It's not a problem with Threadripper, as you can imagine, because Threadripper has PCIe lanes, Gen 4, Gen 5 for days. So that's not a problem there. But yeah. They're going to have to validate some of those other AMD boards, because there's a lot of AMD boards that have Gen 4 X4. I think the reason why we don't see the X670 stuff on here is because the X670 already supports the Thunderbolt 4 add-in card. And I bet you Asus is only validating this for the new AMD boards. Because they're going to try to get people to buy the new motherboards. They have to create... See, here's the thing, guys. You guys have to remember, for most people who already have an X670 or a B650 motherboard, if they want to upgrade to Zen 5 later this year, all they got to do is update the BIOS and just drop in the CPU, and that's it. So that means that if Asus wants to make more money off of the people who are upgrading, they have to give them a reason to upgrade the motherboard. And one of those reasons is USB 4 support. So I have a feeling that the reason why the AMD boards aren't on here, even though there's several AMD boards, like I can already name a whole bunch, like the Strix, the X670 Strix, basically all the Strix boards, I think a few of the Tough boards, like all those boards have Gen 4 X4 lanes or X4 slots. So they could easily support this card. But I bet you Asus wants to try to create an incentive for someone who doesn't need to buy a new motherboard to get Zen 5 because they already have, like for example me, I already have like Zen 4 and I have an X670E motherboard. So it's like, why do I need to buy a new motherboard when all I need to do is buy the new Zen 5 chip and update the BIOS? Well, one of the reasons might be USB 4. So to try to entice someone into spending money on a motherboard that they might not need, they artificially put the new USB 4 card with the new motherboards, and they don't update the BIOS on the old ones to support the new add-in card. Will the X670E USB 4 support Thunderbolt devices? Yes, it should. Yes, RK, yes. As long as PCIe tunneling is enabled, these new USB 4 add-in cards and motherboards will support Thunderbolt devices. That is something that I will most likely be testing. You can expect, as soon as I can get my hands on this card from Asus, as soon as I can get one of these, because I can pretty much guarantee I will get one of these cards at some point this year, and I will make at least a couple of videos focusing on USB 4. And I will test my Thunderbolt capture card, which is Thunderbolt 3, and it requires Thunderbolt and PCI tunneling. I will test it with this card and prove that it works. So, you would see 75 watt usage out of the PCIe slot. Yeah, but usually they don't pull 75 watts. Usually they don't pull more than like 30 watts, typically, through the PCIe slot. Yeah. Wow, we talked a lot about USB 4. I wasn't expecting to go this much in depth into this subject. Whoever asked, I appreciate you asked the question, because this was actually a really good discussion. But yeah, this is going to be one of the new like selling points of the new motherboards this year. And the same applies to Intel. I'm sure like there'll be a bunch of Intel ones that also get support. I mean, we can already tell, like you can see here, like there's a bunch of Intel Z790 that support this card, so I can only imagine. Obviously, the new AMD motherboards are not announced yet, so Asus cannot publicly show those on their compatibility list. Otherwise, you can guarantee that this would show up as like a Twitter leak from somebody would post the tweet like, hey, I found all the motherboards for the next gen AMD from some compatibility list from Asus. You know, like obviously that wouldn't work. So, or that would not be good for Asus if that happened. So that's why. But yeah. Okay, well that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Intel, speaking of, well, okay, I guess shifting gears here, we talked a lot about upcoming Zen 5. So Intel finally reveals bleeding edge 10 angstrom 1 nanometer process targeted beyond 2028. So they're going all in on like the next decade, basically, for their next generation serious business stuff. So, Intel aims to be the world's largest foundry by 2030. Seems achievable. Yeah, I guess I should have watched this. I did not watch this. Intel had their Foundry Day, I think it was like 2 weeks ago. I should have watched it, actually, because now I don't really know too much about this. I know that they want to do... they want to get, like, business from their competitors. Like, they want AMD and nvidia to, and not just them, like also Apple and everybody else, they want them to go to Intel so that Intel can manufacture their chips on their foundry node instead of them going to TSMC. So we'll see how that plays out. I haven't been really paying too much attention to it because it's so far off. You know, we're talking like 2028 at the earliest. Actually, it says like, yeah. So this is a well way off from now. You know, like this is a long time off. 2028. That's gonna be like. That's like what the the PC definitive edition of like GTA 6 or something. So when that comes out, so probably in 2028. So yeah, that's like a long time from now. Microsoft Direct SR. I don't know what SR is to make. Oh, super. Okay, Microsoft Direct Super Resolution to make super resolution integration into games seamless for devs. Supports all the upscalers. Okay. This is a weird story. I think they want to leverage this on their what? What are they? I don't know what this is for. I guess this is for their first party titles. It's kind of a weird. I don't know. That's just something that it just stuck out to me. Like, okay, they're making something for super resolution. Gelsinger might pull this off. All right, and then the other one that kind of stood out to me was Crucial's P3 Plus. This is a Gen 4 SSD, I believe. It's not the fastest Gen 4 SSD, but that's a pretty good price. It's not the best price. I've seen cheaper during the Black Friday deal. You could get one of these for under 200. I think I got one for like 160 during the Black Friday holiday special. But they say that flash memory is going to go up in price. So $200-ish for a 4 terabyte M.2 Gen 4. That's pretty good. You gotta justify all that government funding. Yeah, this is... I don't know. I find, like, the cheapest you can go for the highest density, as long as it has the... What do they call it? It has, like, the cache. The local cache thing that it uses so that it doesn't slow down after it like fully saturates the buffer. Like as long as it has that decent cache buffer, I forgot what they call it on SSDs, but as long as it has one of those, then that's pretty good. Yeah, the DRAM. Thanks. Yeah, the DRAM. As long as it has DRAM, this is good enough. I would say. Like it doesn't need to be the fastest DRAM cache you want is TLC. I think all of it's TLC for DRAM. But even if it's QLC DRAM, I don't even think that's that bad. Because, I mean, that just means that the lifespan is not as long. But realistically, like, you do the math, the lifespan on these, even if you buy, like, what is it? Total bytes written. I think the total bytes written is, like, 300 total bytes written. That's still going to be more than like 6 years. So, yeah. And again, remember that metric, that like 6-year lifespan, that means that it's like writing and reading. It's cycling the drive like 24/7 every single day. So, yeah. I don't really see that as a problem. Where's all the X3D or the 3D X point stuff? You mean, are you talking about like Optane or something? Back to the Microsoft upscaler? Oh, that's an interesting idea. Right, I know, man. I mean, I still have like I still have an old SATA based 2.5-inch SSD from like 10 years ago, and it still works. It's still going strong, and it's only like a 250 gigabyte SSD, and it's still kicking. And it's one of those bad like Samsung 840 Evos. You guys remember the one that had like the terrible firmware? You had to do a firmware update because I forgot what the problem was with it, but it was like it slowed down immensely due to some kind of firmware bug. I mean, it's one of those. I've got one of those, and it's so old, and it still works. One of my Intel SATA drives died, but I wasn't using either of them. Oh, wow, it actually died? Like, the thing is, the only way I can think of the SSD dying is it has to be, like, if it was used in a server. Like, if it was used in a server where the data was constantly being accessed, so there was so many read cycles happening all the time for years, and occasionally there'll be write cycles, like, that's the only way I could think of the drive actually dying. Like, if you're using the drive in a laptop or a desktop, and it's not doing things all the time, like, I think those things can last pretty much for decades. Due to connector issue, like the SATA port got broken. Oh well, man, that's not even. Yeah, that's not even like the same thing. That's not the fault of the actual flash memory failing. I mean, that could just be like a bad SATA cable too. Sometimes those SATA cables, especially if you bend them to fit in the case, like that can cause a problem. I've seen SATA cables act weird sometimes, and you'll swap them out, and then the drive's fine. Like there was one drive that I had that I thought was dying. It was an old 3.5-inch hard drive, but I swapped the SATA cable, and the drive was perfect after that. Like, no problems. So yeah, I've seen issues with the SATA cables themselves. Like, if they're bent really bad, that can cause issues. Hell, a lot bad. Yeah, see? Yeah, the cable. All the hard drives died at 10 years old. Yeah, I've got a couple of Intel SSDs, actually. In fact, I think I have one in this computer. Let me see. Do I have one in here? Okay, I don't have one in here, but I definitely have an Intel SSD in my Threadripper machine. I know for a fact I have an Intel 670p in my Threadripper computer, alongside an Intel Arc A770. I've got a AMD monster CPU with an Intel flagship GPU. That's weird. You got AMD CPU plus Intel GPU. I need to get one of those. Does anybody know if they make like a single slot RTX 4060 or something? Is there a single slot RTX 4060? Wait a minute, what? 4060 Ti Max 16? Though it is the first single slot RTX. Okay, man, I gotta get one of these. You know why I gotta get one of these? Because if I get this, that means I'll have an AMD Threadripper computer that has a 7900 XTX as a primary GPU, plus an Intel A770 secondary GPU, and then I can put this thing in at the very bottom of the computer. Or actually, no, I wedge this between the 7900 XTX and the Intel A770. That way, I'd have a Threadripper CPU plus an AMD Radeon GPU plus an nvidia RTX 40 GPU plus an Intel GPU. I'd have all three brands of GPUs in my Threadripper machine. So yeah, I gotta get something like this. They actually made a single slot 4060. This is the type of 4060 that I would buy. This is the type of 4060 that more vendors should make. This is cool. Not some stupid looking gamery RGB vomit covered 4060 Ti that no one cares about. No. This professional looking thing is exactly what I need. Single slot. Because I can't fit, because here's the thing, like I already, if you guys, those of you that have been following my stream for a while, you guys know I built a Threadripper PC last year. It currently has 2 GPUs in it. It has the A770 limited edition, Intel reference, and it has an AMD 7900 XTX reference card. So I've got this, and I've got, where is this? So I've got one of these in there, and I've got one of these in there. Both reference. I've got my little USB-C ready to go, so whenever Sony decides to bring that PlayStation VR 2 to PC, like they said they will, I'll be able to plug my PlayStation VR 2 headset straight into my AMD card, because my AMD card already has the USB-C port ready to go with full DisplayPort alt mode support. So that's there for a reason. This is here so I can test Intel and not have to worry about any kind of random weird things, because I can always just drive things through the AMD monitor or the AMD card for the output. And then this will be in here just so I can say, hey, I've got all 3 GPUs in one computer. How is the Founders Edition of the 4060 not single slot? Which one? Well, the thing is, this is never going to get loud, guys, because I'm not going to use this to play games. I'm just going to put this in there so that I can say that I have an AMD, an nvidia, and an Intel GPU all in one computer. I mean, I guess I could use this for... Isn't there a way to, like, use DLSS 3? Oh, okay, what if I, like... Okay, how about this? How about this? Is it possible for me to use the AMD GPU, the XTX, for rendering the game, but then turn on DLSS frame gen or whatever through this thing? Didn't somebody do that? I feel like someone already did that. Or they did it the other way around. They used, like... They got FSR 3... working with a GeForce, through a GeForce card with, I forgot what it was. No, it was an NVIDIA proprietary thing. Like they did some, I forgot what they did. I have to look it up. But basically, I would use this only for like the NVIDIA exclusive things, but I would actually use the AMD card for everything. Like I would only use this so that I would have access to DLSS. Like, I guess that means I would have to plug the monitor into this. But then in Windows, I would specify... I would render the game using the XTX. Something like that. I don't know. Like, however it would work. Like, this is probably going to be kind of noisy because it's so small. But I'm surprised it's 4060 Ti and not 4060. That makes this even better, actually. And it's 16 gigabyte. It's the 16 gigabyte card. Yeah, if this thing was like $360 to $380, I would probably consider getting this. Like, the thing is, I wish this was 4060. Because it would be cheaper, you know, you could get it for like sub 300, but it being the 16 gig, well, I mean, it's good for like AI stuff, I guess. Although it's 4060 Ti, which is not that great. Can't find anyone doing DLSS on second card. I think you can though. See, the problem is there's not a lot of people out there that will have more than one GPU. That's why it's so hard to find this kind of stuff. Because you're going to need like a Threadripper to do it. You're going to need something with a whole bunch of PCIe slots and PCIe lanes. So, Threadripper is really the only sort of computer that you could pull this off. Because you've got TRX 50 Sage Yeah, because you got like this. See, like here's the thing, right? Like I would do the AMD card is at the very top, and then I would put nothing in the middle one or the second one. That'd be empty. I would put the nvidia GPU in the third slot. So that single slot 4060 Ti would literally go in the third slot. And then at the very bottom, I would put the Intel Arc GPU because that's actually already where I have the Intel GPU. Like I got Intel down here at the very bottom, and then I've got AMD at the very top. That way, they're not both starved for air because they're far away from each other. And also the Intel one, there's enough space between Intel and the power supply, so it's like it's not like it's starved. I also don't really use it for gaming. I mean, you guys remember back at the start of the year, I did a live stream off of this motherboard with the Intel GPU and the AMD GPU. In fact, I think I was live streaming Halo Master Collection or Master Chief Collection, and I started half of the stream was done using the XTX, the second half of it was done using the A770, and it worked flawlessly. So if I put the NVIDIA GPU in the middle, I mean, that'll work fine. It needs to be single slot, though. I'm not going to be any more dual slot nonsense. The AMD card's 2.5 slots. The Intel GPU's 2 slots. I want the NVIDIA one to be a single slot. You've thought of the concept of using another NVIDIA GPU just for frame generation purposes, but never researched it. Well, the thing is, if you already have an NVIDIA GPU, then I don't think you need a second one. Like, the only reason why you would want to do multi-GPU is if you want to go multi-vendor. That way, you're not constricted. You're not confined to a specific vendor. Because I'm someone who does not like vendor lock-in. I like to be vendor agnostic and go with, like, whatever I can get my hands on. So, and basically utilize all the different capabilities. So currently I have an AMD card and an Intel card. I really want to add an NVIDIA card, but my current NVIDIA cards are all too big to fit in this motherboard because I'm not going to take out the other 2 GPUs to fit the NVIDIA GPU. So, and if I'm going to add a third card, the third card can't be insanely high power consumption because my AMD card is already pulling like 350 watts. And the Intel one is another like 200-ish watt GPU. So it's like that's already like 500 watts if we're trying to like multi-load the system. So I really want an energy efficient NVIDIA card, and that's why 4060 is really the only one that makes sense. You're either getting Battle Mage or RDNA 4. Yeah, I'm really hoping RDNA 4 has a massive increase in ray tracing, because if RDNA 4 is like a more energy efficient RDNA 3 in terms of rasterization with better RT, I might actually get one of those too, and I might actually put it in the Threadripper system for that reason. Not sure what I'm gonna do with the Battle Mage one. That we'll see. If Battle Mage comes out and if it's like 4070 or better, yeah, I'm definitely gonna get one of those, and that's gonna replace the A770, like immediately. That's going to immediately replace the A770. So, yeah. But for my own use case, out of the 3 vendors, NVIDIA is actually the most useless one. Unless I'm doing a lot of stuff with AI, the NVIDIA GPU is actually the least preferred one for my use case. Because, for example, I'll give you guys an example. DaVinci Resolve. I use the free version of DaVinci Resolve, and for whatever reason, if you use the free version of DaVinci Resolve, you cannot use AV1 to encode your video, or you can't encode to AV1 unless you have the paid version of DaVinci Resolve. So you either have to be on the paid version if you have an NVIDIA RTX 40 series GPU, if you want AV1. Otherwise, if you're on the free version of DaVinci Resolve like I am, like why do I need to pay if I can just use AV1 for free on DaVinci Resolve? That works for both AMD 7000 series and Intel A770, or I guess all of Intel's GPUs. So Intel and AMD both have AV1 encoding for free on DaVinci Resolve. For some reason, if you have NVIDIA, you gotta pay. You gotta pay that NVIDIA tax. You get taxed even more. NVIDIA tax, just all those professional apps, you gotta pay the NVIDIA tax. But if you're on AMD or Intel, you get in free. I don't know why. I'm not the one who made that a thing, but it's super annoying because ever since I put the 4080 Super in the streaming PC, I lost AV1 encoding because I don't have the paid version of DaVinci Resolve. I'm not going to go and like update all of them because I basically have DaVinci Resolve installed on like multiple machines. I'm not going to go and like put the paid version because that's a waste of money and that's a waste of time. So that's really annoying. But if I'm going to do like AI stuff, then yeah, the NVIDIA GPU works the best versus the other two. In fact, I still haven't figured out how to get, like I need to go look into how to get Stable Diffusion working with the Intel. I know it can be done. I haven't bothered to look up the process of how to get it working with Intel though. Intel needs to work on their drivers when they get good in that space. Then we should talk about what's SL's what? Oh, SLI. If Intel goes SLI, it will be bonkers. Oh, why would they go SLI? The reason why no one's gonna go SLI, okay, SLI still exists, guys, just not for games. SLI works in the professional world. Like you can utilize multiple GPUs with a lot of software productivity apps. But games don't use SLI anymore. And the reason why they don't do it anymore is because of all these modern post-processing effects. So, for example, upscaling. You cannot use SLI if you want to use DLSS. It does not work. It does not work at all. So if you like DLSS, or if you are dependent on DLSS because your GPU is not powerful enough for whatever monitor you're using, forget about SLI. It'll never work with DLSS. Frame generation, that's another thing. Frame generation and SLI do not mix. That's like mixing oil and water. It's not going to work. So it would take a literal army of computer engineers to make that a reality. And looking at how NVIDIA has prioritized their business units, they're all focused on AI, so I can assure you they are not going to look at SLI for DLSS and these sort of things. Async rendering makes it impossible. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's even older, but yeah. All the async compute, all those things, it does, well, in a way, if you had a hardware scheduler that could talk to the other hardware scheduler on the other GPU, in theory, you could get async compute working over multi-GPU. But yeah, RT, all that stuff, no. No, probably not. Although that's more of like a game engine thing, so maybe RT with multi-GPU is a possibility. I just know that any sort of post-processing effect kills SLI, and that's what ultimately destroyed it. And that's why multi-GPU doesn't exist anymore in games. Async rendering, yeah. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. I didn't really have any other... I mean, what is this? Dragon's Dogma, Rise of the Ronin, more... Yeah, the Elden Ring DLC thing was announced earlier this week, I think. Yeah, was it this week? Or was it last week? I think it was this week. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was this week. But yeah, I'm glad that Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree is not coming out until June. Because, like I said previously, if that thing was coming out now, wow, that would be terrible for me. But yeah, this is... Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is out as of yesterday. Was it yesterday? No, today? Well, today, well, okay, midnight Eastern yesterday, or I guess, well, it was technically when today started. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out. That game, I am going to be playing a lot of that game. I'm probably going to be live streaming that game this weekend. Or at least I plan to. Unless something comes up. I was going to try to do a live stream last weekend. It didn't happen. I was stuck with some other stuff that I had to do. But yeah, I plan to live stream some of my Final Fantasy VII playthrough, or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth playthrough, and then after Final Fantasy VII, because that's like, those of you that have been watching my channel for a while, Final Fantasy VII has been one of my most anticipated games of this year, so I definitely am going to do at least one stream featuring that game. But anyone who's watching, if you guys want to ask tech-related questions, feel free to distract me from playing the game. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. The other games that are coming out next month, so as shown here, Dragon's Dogma 2. I never played the first Dragon's Dogma, but this is one that is highly anticipated for a lot of people. I remain kind of observing this game. I think the game that I will play on the day it comes out is Rise of the Ronin. This one is more in terms of like what I want to play or what I enjoy playing. Rise of the Ronin is definitely going to be a game that I will be featuring on this channel, which is interesting because so far what I have noticed is that the PlayStation console, though the PlayStation it's not really releasing any new first-party titles this year. It's getting a lot of very good exclusive games from third-party studios. So I expect Rise of the Ronin to be a huge time sink for me. And this is a PlayStation exclusive coming out next month. And then we literally have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, probably one of the largest game launches of the year. And that is a PlayStation 5 exclusive for now, at least. Just like Final Fantasy 16 was last year. So that followed by Rise of the Ronin, and there's like another one that I can't think of right now that's supposed to also be a PlayStation 5 exclusive. I'm forgetting what that is. I can't remember what it is. But there's like another one. Oh yes, Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is coming out in April, and that is another PlayStation 5 timed exclusive. So we have Final Fantasy VII in February, or the very end of February, Rise of the Ronin in March, in like the second half of March, and then we have Stellar Blade in the second half of April. So anybody who is heavily invested in the Sony PlayStation 5, this is the year of PlayStation 5, because PlayStation 5 is getting so many good exclusives, all within like a 90-day window. And none of that's coming to PC for a pretty long time. So I'm not going to wait around. I would definitely prefer to play these games on PC, don't get me wrong, but the thing is, I'm not going to wait around for like a year or more to play these games. No, I'm just going to play them on the PlayStation 5. So Sony did do an experiment, though, with Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 was a huge success for Sony because they decided to launch it simultaneously on PlayStation and on PC. And this is a PlayStation published title, I might add. A lot of people don't even know that. A lot of people who are playing Helldivers 2 on PC don't even know that it's a PlayStation game. But that just goes to show, this is kind of, I think this is a message to Sony that, hey, maybe you don't need to do timed exclusives, because you might, I mean, they have to look at the accounting and see, like, okay, if they have to go back and look at how, well, they'll be able to verify this literally next month, because think about it like this. Sony went and launched Helldivers 2 on PC and PlayStation simultaneously. So they're basically getting all the revenue from the whole target demographic all at once, versus what they did with Horizon Forbidden West. This is a new recent example, because Horizon Forbidden West launched as a PlayStation 5 exclusive in February of 2022. 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Horizon Forbidden West launched as a PlayStation 5 exclusive. Well, guess what's coming next month to PC? You guessed it. Horizon Forbidden West is coming to PC next month. So when Sony, I guess what they can do is they can do market research and figure out, okay, if we look at how many sales we did on PlayStation over a 2-year, or I guess they'll, I don't know how they, probably like the first month sales of Forbidden West on PlayStation 2 years ago, and then they can look at how many sales they do on Steam and wherever else, if it's Epic or whatever, they do for Horizon on PC, and they kind of take that combined aggregate total, and then they can look at how that compares to Helldivers 2, which launched all at once, which one resulted in more sales, meaning is there a benefit to doing a timed exclusive if you have the full intention of bringing your game to other consoles or other platforms later down the line. So, I don't know. I think it's probably not the best comparison, because Forbidden West is a single-player game, whereas Helldivers 2 is kind of like a co-op game, although you can play it solo. I think it's definitely more fun to play that game co-op. But yeah, we'll see. RDNA 3... Wait, plus Sony might get some good from Xbox. RDNA 3 is approved? A proof of what? What went wrong with RDNA 3? RDNA 4 is expected to be first solid. I don't think we know much about RDNA 4 at all, to be honest. Like, in terms of if it's going to be multi-chip or not. Does anybody actually know? I think RDNA 4 is going to be less of a performance uplift over RDNA 3 compared to RDNA 3 over RDNA 2. That's what everybody seems to be saying. 4090, 5090. 5090 also is supposedly, now this is what a lot of people are saying, so I don't know how much I would recommend these statements, but the 5090 is not supposed to be as much of a leap over the 4090 the way the 4090 was over the 3090. Not a bad idea. The rumors is that RDNA 5 is next year. Yeah, I think it is. 7800 is also half the cost of the launch price. Yeah, that's correct. All I've heard is less performance gains, but better value. Do you think PS5 Pro will release this year? Yes, I'm pretty sure it's coming this year. And here's the thing, like, okay, PS5 Pro, man, I wish PS5 Pro came out last year. Because I'll tell you guys, I am not happy about the way Final Fantasy VII runs on PlayStation 5. Now, what I don't understand is Final Fantasy VII Remake originally came out 4 years ago on the PlayStation 4. And it ran, like, it ran horrible on PS4. Like, that game ran like garbage on PS4. It was like 30 frames per second, 1080p, or like 720p, somehow dynamic resolution upscale, whatever, to run at an unlocked frame rate or something on the PS4 Pro. It was basically trash on PlayStation 4. Fast forward to PlayStation 5. So, okay, think about it like this. I'm pretty much 100% certain that PS5 Pro is coming out this year. And I'll tell you, here's the reason why. So, remake. I gotta bring up Paint again because it's the only way I can explain this where everyone can understand what I'm saying. Where it's very clear. Okay, what do I need to... I guess... Okay, we'll just say right here, like... Final Fantasy VII Remake launched early 2020. Guess what came out at the very end of 2020? We all know what 2020 was. 2020 was pandemic. That was the pandemic year. Final Fantasy VII Remake comes out. Everybody gets the pandemic. Then guess what happens at the end? PS5 launches in November 2020. Check it out. You had Remake. It launched early. It ran like garbage on PS4. Then PS5 comes out at the end of the year. No one can buy one because of scalpers and supply shortages. And then they release a patch, or like they allow you to play it on... Well, obviously you could play the PS4 version on PS5. And guess what? Magic 60 FPS on PS5. Like it runs Final Fantasy VII Remake like it's easy mode. There's nothing to it. Piece of cake. It's like 100% 60 FPS all the time. It's like wonderful. It looks so good. Then they released the patch. The PS5 free upgrade version. If you bought Remake, you can download the PS5 version for free. And that one upscaled all the way to 4K, blah, 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 60 FPS. It was great. They fixed all the texture, low-res textures, all that stuff. Bottom line is PS5 is the best way to play Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because PC, then, like 2 years later, it came out on PC. And guess what? The dreaded compilation stutter. You get compilation stutter like mad on the PC version of the game. To the point where it's actually better, it's smoother to play the game on the PS5 because it doesn't have the stuttering problems. So, now, here we are. FF7 Rebirth launches early 2024. I can't believe these games are like 4 years apart. This just shows that the game development life cycles are way too long. So, you know what this means? PS5 Pro this fall, 100% guaranteed. You know why? Because they're gonna do this. This is the strategy, guys. This is the strategy. This is how you get people to buy new consoles, even if they don't need them. You launch like an awesome game like Final Fantasy Rebirth earlier in the year, so people who want to play it, they buy it. And they just suffer through either terrible low-res textures and poor lighting in the 60 FPS performance mode, or they can run it at 4K 30 FPS for that cinematic experience. Meanwhile, they know that when they go and put the PS5 Pro out there later in the year, all those people that were sitting on the fence or holding out for the PC version, when they see how much better Rebirth runs on the Pro, they're going to immediately go out and buy the Pro, and they're going to buy Rebirth. And they're not going to be waiting around for like 2 years for the PC version of the game. So, which, knowing Square Enix and their track record of PC ports, I wouldn't put it behind them that they're going to have a lousy PC port. Or a subpar PC port, because they haven't really had that many good like their track record of PC ports for games that were delayed onto the PC platform is not really that good. Final Fantasy 15 ran like trash on PC until you basically got new GPUs and CPUs that could brute force their way through the terrible engine that is Luminous. Then we got Forspoken last year, which is, a nightmare for anyone who doesn't have any modern hardware at all. So, and that's basically just a modified Final Fantasy 15 engine. So I can already tell Final Fantasy 16 on PC, that's probably going to have like insanely high specs to run that game at 60 FPS 4K resolution, native resolution. So I would imagine Final Fantasy... So I can't imagine Rebirth being that much harder to run than Remake because it's still Unreal Engine. But yeah, like I would expect, because it runs so bad on PS5, now granted it's not that bad on PS5, Square Enix just uses the most archaic, terrible upscalers for the 60 FPS mode. I don't know why they aren't using FSR 2. At least use FSR 2. It would literally fix all the issues with the performance mode. But I don't know what they're doing. Like, who is making the design decisions or the choices for their upscaler? They really need to probably fire that person and get an entirely new team that handles optimization. Yeah, I know. And Final Fantasy VII Remake is not the problem. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the problem, and that game literally came out today. That's what we're complaining about. We're not complaining about Remake, we're complaining about Rebirth. Looking at a PS5 Pro dev kit, so people got yeah, no, they're already out, man. Like the Pro is coming out this fall. We know it. We know it. It's definitely coming out this fall. The Slim came out last year. Or was it the previous year? No, yeah, I think the Slim was like last year. So definitely the Pro should be coming out this year. It might not even be this fall, although I think it's going to be this fall. But yeah, like, it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, launch this, and then this will come out then. Because you know what's coming out next year? Okay, for PS5 Pro. Or I guess, like, okay, we all know GTA 6. GTA 6 is coming out next year. 2026. Console exclusive? Really, Rockstar? Console exclusive for 2026. You know what that means? The PC version is like 2027. Or at least like 6 or 8 months after the console. GTA 6 going to take... Possibly, Nero. Yeah, possibly. You know, like, it could be 2 years. That's why I said at the beginning of the stream, 2028. Remember we were well, that wasn't the beginning. We were talking about Intel and their 2028 Angstrom node. I said that's when GTA 6 PC version is coming out. Because yeah, no, I think it's still gonna come out in 2026 though. Or did I say 2026? Wait, hold on. Next year is 2025. 2025 console. Although it might be, yeah, it might be at the end of that year. But anyway, we definitely need like this. This needs to come out like ASAP. Like for real. I'm already, man, like the PS5 feels so slow. Okay, it loads fast, but the games run so bad. Like Lords of the Fallen runs like garbage on the PS5. Although, I mean, I think they nerfed the game so much in terms of visuals to get it to run more decently now, but it still doesn't run that great. But at launch, Lords of the Fallen ran like complete garbage on the PlayStation 5. We're talking like judder fest, stutter fest, like sub 30 FPS boss fights. It was like Dark Souls 1 Blighttown on PS3 all over again. The PTSD from having to navigate Blighttown on the PS3 like literally hit me so hard while trying to play Lords of the Fallen on the PS5. That's how bad it was. So, like Final Fantasy 16 also, like, if you want to play your games on PlayStation at 60 frames per second, it's you feel like you're playing late PS3 slash early PS4 games in terms of visual quality. It's because of the way they do their upscalers. Like, these guys are using like the worst upscalers imaginable. Like, they're using FSR 1 for like Final Fantasy 16. They're using like nearest neighbor scaling dynamic nonsense stuff from like a decade ago for Rebirth. What are they doing? And then it's like, it's not even just Sony. It's like, or not even Square. It's like other developers are doing stupid things. Like, they're developing a UE5 game that runs at like 25 frames per second during boss fights with judder everywhere and frame times that are terrible. Like, man, it doesn't even, it made me feel like it almost made me feel like I'm not even playing on a PlayStation. It makes me feel like I'm playing on like on a really old graphics card or like a really, really CPU bound computer. It's so bad. Like, seriously. So this may be the year of the PlayStation 5, but it's not a year of the PlayStation 5 in a good way. I'll put it that way. We really need the PS5 Pro to fix a lot of those issues because a 7700 XT level GPU with proper FSR2 would actually fix all of my complaints. My experience from Zen 2 to Zen 3 was a very noticeable reduction in latency. Yeah. Well, Zen 3 was like really, really good. I don't know if we're ever going to see that kind of jump again from any CPU vendor. PS5 is almost never CPU limited. Yeah, I know. It just felt like it was. It felt like I was playing on a really old computer for some reason. It's in that one game. I mean, Forspoken runs like trash on the PlayStation as well. But Forspoken runs like trash on almost every computer. Unless it's like a super high-end computer. Yeah, well, I can tell you guys already. Like, here's what I plan on getting this year. Here, I'll just put my list above me. So I plan to get PS5 Pro. Like, I am 100% getting a PS5 Pro. Like, literally, day one when that thing comes out, I'm getting one of those. Because I can't stand the way it is right now. Like, it's so bad. The games have to be so heavily optimized. Like, the best example I can give you, Horizon Forbidden West. That game, like, if it's a Sony first-person title, then it runs fine. But if it's some, like, third-party thing where they don't know what they're doing when it comes to optimization, I can already list, like, on both of my hands, games that have all kinds of problems. So PS5 Pro, I'm also going to get Battle Mage when it comes out. Zen 5 when it comes out. And I don't know if I'm going to get anything else. Like, unless RDNA 4 is really, really interesting, maybe I'll get one of those. These are the things I know for a fact I'm getting, though. Like, just so you guys know. So you guys can expect to see content on this channel covering PlayStation 5 Pro, Battle Mage, and Zen 5. I don't know about Zen 4 yet. I don't know about 5090 or any of that stuff. 5090 is coming out, but depending on how much that thing costs, and scalpers and availability, I'm not really looking forward to trying to get one of those. So oh, and the Zen 5 is probably going to be Ryzen 9000, by the way, not 8000. Zen 5 is a skip. No, I'm definitely going to Zen 5 because I'm curious to know, or I'm curious to test how they have improved things like the fabric, the F clock. Have they done anything different with the memory ratios? I don't think they will have done anything. I assume the F clock will clock higher. And because F clock clocks higher, naturally U clock will be able to go higher. So the 1-to-1 ratios might change, or just the number might change. The actual ratios are probably not going to change. No, Nero, I don't think they are. I don't think so. We could be surprised though. They might do some kind of weird thing where they do like the Zen. Well, no, I don't expect them to change the cores. I think it's still going to be like 16 cores the max. Realistically though, 16 core for consumer desktop is really all you need. Take it from me, I have a 48 thread machine, and you don't really see apps. Like, you don't see consumer-based apps, especially games, scaling really beyond 8 threads at any given time. So, oh, the AI stuff, I don't know if that's going to be in the desktop part. That's already in the mobile processors. I don't know if that's going to be in desktop. That's a good question, though. Possibly. They might have, like, a specific version, but I don't know. I don't really think they need to do a whole lot with that. I feel like the people who are buying the desktop CPUs, they're the type of people that want to turn off the AI cores due to privacy concerns and that sort of thing. I mean, we talked about that on the previous live stream last week when we were talking about the 8700G and we were comparing that to the Ryzen, the 8040 on mobile, because AMD already has AI cores in their mobile CPUs. In fact, they've had them since the 7040 from last year. They continue porting mobile CPU to desktop? Yeah, possibly. But the thing is, see, like, here's the thing. They always do that, though. They always do this thing, 8700G. They always do that. It started with the 4000 series. 4000 series was the mobile on desktop. Like the 4600G or whatever it was called. Then they had the 5000G. Then they had 6000G, I think. Well, actually, I don't know if they did 6000G. I know they had 6000. They had mobile 6000. Cezanne had a desktop release. Yes, the 6700G. Yeah. I don't know if the 6000 series had a desktop release. I don't remember that one for some reason. Yeah, Zen 3.5 never made it. Yeah, okay, I thought so. Yeah, because my laptop, my daily driver laptop that I use, that is using Zen 3.5. No. Yes, Zen 3.5. It's a 6850H. A Ryzen 7 6850H. It's a Ryzen Pro 8-core 16-thread on mobile. And that thing is really good. That thing is so energy efficient. That's like the most energy efficient, high-performing mobile chip I've ever used. The battery life on that thing is insane. I can pretty much go the whole day on a desktop replacement workstation laptop. It's crazy. Just running the whole thing on battery all day. Zen 3.5 would have to be on AM5 because it has a DDR5. Yeah, my laptop has DDR5. Yeah, there's like 2 videos or 3 videos featuring that laptop actually on the channel. Just search like I guess like AMD ThinkPad or something and you'll find the videos. In fact, that laptop, the laptop I'm talking about, it has native USB 4. My Thunderbolt 3 capture card works with my AMD laptop, with my Zen 3.5 laptop. I have a video showcasing it. It works. It works with Thunderbolt 4 docking station as well. In fact, the video is showing a Thunderbolt 4 docking station daisy chaining the capture card off of the docking station, and it works. Lenovo was always good with USB 4 and Thunderbolt. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be really, really hard for another laptop brand to pull me away from Lenovo because I have so many Lenovo chargers, and I've just been using ThinkPad for so many generations. Lenovo almost always has... Yeah, it has USB-C power delivery as well. Although it doesn't charge using USB-C. Hey YouTube, and this... Hold on, let me show you guys this real quick. Yeah, this is the video. The 300 watt. So this is my daily driver laptop for those that don't know. And so you can see it's got nvidia graphics in there.
So we have the 300 watt.
So there's the charger, and this is the reason why it's going to be very hard for me to move away from Lenovo, because I have so many different ThinkPad chargers over the years, and they all use that same connector. So here's the Thunderbolt 4. This is a Thunderbolt 4 docking station, and it works perfectly with the AMD Zen 3.5 based laptops. This is a 6000 series laptop. And you can see here's my capture card is connected on a Thunderbolt 3 cable. So it's daisy chained off of the docking station, because the docking station has a custom cable by Lenovo that connects across here. That's what goes into the laptop.
Thunderbolt 4 docking station.
So I got my two DisplayPort monitors. Those are 1440p, 144 hertz, 24-inch monitors, and then we have a mouse connected, and there's the power cable.
Plug that provides the Thunderbolt cable as well as the...
See, there it is, Thunderbolt 4 going into a USB 4 port on a AMD-based laptop.
To the laptop.
And the reason why I like this one more than the Intel one is because, first of all, this one can drive more external monitors than the Intel version. Because that was a question that people kept commenting on this video. People were like, how are you able to run so many displays plus your laptop display at the same time? Because they're like, I have the same laptop, but it doesn't work. And I'm like, are you using the AMD one? And their reply is, no, it's the Intel one. Okay, well, there you go. That's why it doesn't work.
Laptop itself. So the laptop is an AMD.
Because I've tested the Intel version. I have like the Tiger Lake, which is 11th gen Intel on mobile, and it doesn't work.
Base laptop. You can see the Ryzen sticker right there. So this is the P15V Gen 3.
So yeah, see, like, some people don't like the numeric keypad. I've gotten so used to using the numeric keypad on a laptop that I basically can't handle using laptops without it anymore. But, yeah.
So because it has a USB 4 port, it is backwards compatible with Thunderbolt 4 and 3. Which means...
I basically explained Thunderbolt 3 and 4 is backwards compatible with USB 4.
You can use a Thunderbolt device with it like this. So what I have here...
Yeah, so this is basically a demo. So you guys can see there's the NVIDIA control panel. Because this laptop features the... This has the Radeon 6800M mobile graphics processor on the APU, as well as a professional NVIDIA quad, or it's not Quadro anymore, the NVIDIA RTX A2000
is something really interesting to show. The docking station, so obviously we have two monitors, right? So we have the DisplayPort monitors.
There's the external capture card.
Live Gamer 4K capture card.
That is a 4K 60 external capture card. It supports HDR.
Here.
So you can imagine that's why it requires Thunderbolt, because it needs Thunderbolt for the bandwidth for HDR and 4K 60 hertz recording. And all of this works over a docking station. So, like, I mean, you can tell, like, this is some pretty high bandwidth cables right here. All right, so here's the capture from AMD. There's the capture card. It's capturing footage that's playing back. This is from an older video. This is the unboxing video that I did for the Intel A770. Like, I guess a year before this, or whenever I did that. Oh, actually, it was a few months or the same month that I did this. I don't know. This has been a while since I made this video.
I have like a video playing off of.
But that's 4K 60 playback and recording.
Lenovo.
And here's an old Lenovo ThinkPad that I have.
You kind of see it. So that is a.
This is using a Ryzen 7 2700U. So this is like the first generation. This is like Zen 1 on a laptop.
AMD Ryzen Pro. That was like the very first.
So that's
laptop.
I think that's like a quad. That's a quad core 8-thread laptop.
That was AMD based. That was a ThinkPad. So I did a video.
So
on that.
that's basically, I have two laptops. I have one for like traveling, which is the small old one that you guys saw. That ancient laptop. That's a 14-inch, thin and light. And then I have the big workstation, which is the one that I'm showcasing in the video.
One a few years ago when it was new. But here we are today using a Thunderbolt 4 docking station with a
and then I have a game. Then I have like Final Fantasy 14 running too on the laptop with all this other stuff going on in the background. And the game is being rendered off of the nvidia RTX A2000, I think.
Technically, aren't really supposed to be using it for gaming, but
I think it's the nvidia.
You can game on this thing. So just to kind of show graphics performance.
Yeah, see,
like
so we're running the game at
Ti
like 70
mobile
frames per second.
Chip. This is a 4GB card. So not
yeah, there it is. RTX A2000. This, for those wondering, what does that mean? That is the professional version of the 3050 Ti. This is a 3050 Ti mobile chip, is what this laptop has.
If you are on battery power, it will run via the Radeon graphics instead. So
on battery, it will run using the Radeon 680M. So yeah, so this is actually a really, really nice laptop for like a kind of like a working computer. It has like everything that you need. It has it. It's got USB 4. It has the AMD integrated 680M for insane battery life on the go and really good mobile performance. And then it has the nvidia 3050 Ti for like professional whatever. So it's, or like discrete gaming. So it's got like everything you need.
Desktop replacement.
It's not a gimmicky gaming laptop. It's actually a true, like what I would consider a real laptop.
ThinkPads are basically, you know,
the RTX A2000 is a Ampere 106 die with.
At least if you go with the P series.
Yeah, it's pretty much equivalent to a 3050 Ti.
And this is AMD based, so we get great battery life when we're on the go. We have great connectivity. We have.
So it basically gives you everything. It has like the battery life from AMD, the energy efficiency from AMD. It has the CUDA from nvidia. It has the USB 4, so you have all the Thunderbolt stuff. The laptop is also not hot and loud because it's not an Intel laptop. Intel laptops are the ones that tend to be hot and loud. Trust me, because the laptop I had before this for work was an Intel, like Tiger Lake, I think, 11th gen. Man, that thing was loud. The fan spins like pretty much all day as soon as you plug it in. It was just annoying. It's faster though, since it's just slightly cut down 3060. Oh, okay, so it's got more cores.
Have probably the best integrated GPU available, that being the Radeon 680M, along with ISV certified NVIDIA.
Yeah, and of course, you know, like the Zen 4 introduced the 780M, which is even better. So yeah, second gen i7. So I'll tell you, like my previous workstation was the actual desktop replacement was not a Tiger Lake. It was an Intel Kaby Lake, which I think I have a YouTube video on too. Yeah, I think I got a YouTube video of that. It's an Intel 7700 HQ, an i7 7700 HQ. So it's a quad core 8-thread in a workstation. It's bigger and heavier. Okay, same screen size, but it's much thicker and heavier than this. So this is thinner and lighter and quieter. and has like way better battery life. So yeah, and obviously it's like way faster. So, but yeah, the nice thing about that old ThinkPad, that old Intel ThinkPad was that was the last Lenovo ThinkPad workstation that had a removable battery. This one has, unfortunately, it has the battery that's inside the chassis. So if you want to swap the battery, you can do it, but the process is definitely more involved compared to how they used to just be able to click and pull them out of the bottom of the laptop. So
yeah, RTX discrete graphics options as well, so that's really nice. 4K display.
so anyway,
You know, all this connectivity.
I think
the Radeon is
yeah. See, so there's the NVIDIA. The NVIDIA is rendering the game. You can see 72% right there, sitting in the city, where it's CPU bound usually, and then the Radeon. So the thing is, the way this laptop is set up, all the video output goes through the APU. So the Radeon 680M still has to output to the monitor for the game. The NVIDIA is doing the rendering work. So yeah. Let me see. Oh yeah, see, look, here's this is pretty cool. So there's NVIDIA control panel. It shows here the NVIDIA RTX A2000 is selected for PhysX, and it's just kind of there. And then AMD Radeon Graphics, which is the 680M, has all three of the monitors connected. One is the laptop via embedded display port. Then you have two external monitors connected via physical display port. So yeah, that's I like this about NVIDIA's control panel, which is something that the new NVIDIA app lacks. So as my video that I did about that showed, it's basically not really that useful. The new NVIDIA app is kind of useless unless you're somebody who wants to tune your game's INI files. I mean, that was the only thing I could find that was useful in there. Because if you want to do like RTX voice and the shadow play and all that stuff, you still have to download like a separate app and cross launch through there. You have to have the plugin, so it's kind of useless. So, but at least they give you the ability to relaunch. And I keep getting these notifications ever since I installed the NVIDIA app. I keep getting these notifications in the bottom right hand side of my screen that keep telling me to like check out this offer for some Call of Duty thing or whatever. And I'm thinking like, man, this is the sort of stuff. This is the reason why I did not install GeForce Experience. I don't want to be bothered with all these notifications for all this random stuff. It's like it feels like I have adware on my computer now from NVIDIA. So I might end up uninstalling it, but I'm gonna kind of keep it around for now, just to see if I end up needing to use it for some reason in the next month. I'm gonna give it 1 month to play around with it, and maybe do a follow-up video after like 30 days of having the NVIDIA app around to see if it has proven itself to be of any value. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, the interesting things this year are the PS5 Pro, but that's only for people that care about consoles. Although this year is getting a lot of really good PlayStation games. Battle Mage, I'm very interested in seeing how Battle Mage turns out. And then Zen 5, I am definitely going to Zen 5, at least for my main streaming rig. So obviously I have the X3D. If AMD launches an X3D simultaneously, I'll probably end up just getting that. And I won't get the other chip. But if they don't do X3D, I'll just get, whatever their best CPU is, and I'll replace my 7950X with it. But I'll continue to use the X3D in my test rig, and I'll just use that for benchmarking and stuff like that. But we'll see. But I do plan on upgrading this year because it's that 2-year cycle. and it'll be about 2 years when Z5 comes out. So anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this stream. Thank you all for tuning in. I will probably be doing a live stream this weekend featuring Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So if you want to come by and ask questions on whatever tech-related thing or gaming-related thing, feel free to do so. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. And once again, thanks you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.